Well, if you would open your Bibles this morning, we've been talking about, I guess you can open your Bibles to Job. I'm going to tell you what we've been talking about. We've been talking about storms of life. What do we do when storms comes? What happens when storms comes, when the storms arise? Dealing with the trials, the grief, and the heartache, because it's a very real thing to deal with trials, griefs, and heartache in life. Heartache will come. Struggles will come. Hurt will come, and we have to deal with that. And, we talked about Lazarus, how when Lazarus was dead, how real the heartache was for his sisters when Jesus Christ came. It was a real thing. It is not something that people inflate or that is imaginary. If you've experienced that loss, if you've experienced that grief, you understand how real it truly is. Amen. And even in the face of Jesus Christ, standing right before him, Martha struggled with the grief that she had in her life. Mary struggled with the grief that she had in her life. And then, we also talked about how when we go through these storms, we go through these trials, like people can let us down, right? Our own self can let us down. Jesus Christ was talking to the disciples and trying to prepare them for what was coming when he was getting ready to go to the cross. And he was like, you guys are going to run away. You guys are going to flee. Your own belief system, your own foundation is going to crumble because what you guys thought of how life was supposed to go, how things were supposed to be, was going to come crashing down. It's difficult when our dreams or our what we think, how we think it should be, how about this, our house of cards, if you will. We spend our lives building a house of cards. And has anybody ever built a house with cards? I used to sit around and do that. I used to use Uno cards, and I'd put them all together, and I'd do that. One little breeze of someone walking past can knock that down. One little thing can knock that down. And then all the work we put into it, all the effort that we had is now gone. And Jesus Christ was telling his disciples, you've got to learn to prepare for this. I want you to be ready for when the true trial comes. And remember, he told them, he goes, I speak these things to you to bring comfort to you. Right? And he says, because you're going to find peace in me. Well, today I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about faith. Faith. Because a lot of times when someone goes through a trial, when someone goes through a hardship, it's faith that they have to have. And a lot of times when someone goes through a trial or a hardship or they're struggling with that grief, people look at them and say, well, you just need to increase your faith. Right? It's easy for us to stand on the outside and judge someone else's faith. But in Job, the book of Job, chapter 1, we're going to start with the first 3 verses there, and then we're going to drop down towards the end of that chapter, and we're going to read some verses. Now, we're going to spend all of this morning in the book of Job. All right, so we're going to stay in Job this morning. We're not going to go anywhere else. Okay? So that's where we're going to be, but we're going to be kind of bouncing around a little bit because Job is a tremendous story of someone who struggled. Someone who experienced grief, they experience loss, they experience pain in their life. And in many cases, physical pain as well as the emotional pain. So in Job chapter 1, beginning in verse 1, it says, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, and very great household. Job was a very well-to-do man, wasn't he? So that this man, listen to this, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the East. Job had everything you could ever want. He lacked for nothing. It talked about his children. It talked about his 7 sons and 3 daughters. It talked about how great his household was, the wealth that he had amassed over the years. And then as you go down and you begin reading through chapter 1, it talks about how there was a time, right, when the angels and everything came and reported to God. And guess who showed up? Satan shows up. Then God looks at Satan and basically this is how the conversation went. What have you been up to? That's what God asked Satan. Where are you coming from? What are you doing? And what do you know what Satan said? Going to and fro from the earth. To and fro. His domain, right? Is it not his domain? So he's the prince of the power of the air. And so he's like, I've been going around and I've been raising problems. It's like Satan was not even ashamed of what he was or what he did. He just shows up to God and he said, God, I'm doing exactly what I've always been doing, stirring the pot. I'm going around and see what I can do. I'm going to and fro all over the earth. And then this conversation between God and Job begins to take place. And God basically volunteered Job. If you go back and read it, that's exactly what happened. God says, hast thou not considered my servant Job? God brought him up. Brought him up for the discussion. And so Satan begins to talk to God, and he says, well, I can't. There's nothing I can do. I can't touch him. I can't do this. So God says, okay, you can take his wealth. You can take his family. You can take his cattle, his houses. You can have all that. Don't lay a hand on him. But you can take all that away. And so we see all that happens, right? And so through that, there was enemies that came in and invaded, and they killed, his I think it was his sheep. And then there was basically lightning. It said fire came down, that burned up stuff. I don't know if that was the camels. I think the enemies actually got the camels. I have to go back and read it again. Don't quote me on that one. All right. But between enemies and fire coming down and a great wind that collapsed an entire house, Job lost his children, his wealth, and everything that he owned. He lost it all. And as each man came to report to him, and they said, and Job, I'm the only one left alive to tell you what happened, and this is what happened. The enemies came in and they killed everybody. They took all your camels. Everything's gone. And I'm the only one. And as that guy was not even done speaking, another man was coming in behind him. Said, Job, you need to understand what happened. A great fire came down and you lost all your sheep. I'm the only guy that survived. All your other servants are dead. Everybody's dead. Can you imagine that carnage in the field? Thinking about that. Can you imagine the carnage in the field from the enemies coming and killing people and stealing all of his animals? And then he had a servant come and said, Job, all of your children were feasting together, and a great wind came, and it collapsed all four walls of the banquet hall that they were in, the house that they were in. The house collapsed right on top of them. See, they didn't build houses out of sheetrock and wood back then, which would probably still kill you if it fell on you. They built them out of stone. Great beams of wood for the roof. It was very heavy. So when it collapsed, there was no chance of anyone surviving. And that servant said, I'm the last one alone that's left alive to tell you this. And that's where I want us to pick up now in verse 20 of chapter 1. When he says, hey, Job, I'm the only one. Each one of these men came and said, I'm the only one. Look at what it says. He just got all this bad news in one day at one time. One right after the other walked up. It says, before they were even done speaking, the other one came. So it got worse and worse and worse. Verse 20, then Job arose, rent his mantle, shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. And said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Let's go to the Lord in prayer this morning. Father, we come before you. God, we once again want to say thank you for your word. God, we ask now that it would be your word that would speak to us, that our hearts and minds would be open to your word. And God, we would hear from your voice today. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Job, wealthy man, happy man, he had it all. It even said, what he would do at the beginning of the chapter? His children would go and they would have these banquets because they were well-to-do. They didn't have a lot to do, right? They were probably like, oh, let's get together and let's have a feast. So they were having a feast. You know what Job would do? He would go out the next day and he would make sacrifices for his children. Just on behalf of his children. He loved his children. Job was a family man. He loved his kids. He loved his wife. He probably loved his job. He loved what he did. And he was faithful to God. He gave sacrifices to God. He was faithful to God. He loved God. He cared about God. He was upright. That's what the Word of God says. It said he was perfect and upright. Didn't mean he didn't have mistakes. That word perfect means he was complete. You know where he found his completeness at? In God. Job was complete in God. What does that mean? Job's like, I've got everything I want. Not because I got camels and I got sheep and I got donkeys and I got a house and I got a big house and I got a wife and I got kids and I got everything I want. And he says, I've got everything I want because I have God. That's where Job's heart was. And because of that, God blessed him. God gave Job many, 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 many things, and now all in the blink of an eye, in probably the span of 5 minutes, from beginning to end, Job lost everything. He didn't just lose a child, he lost every child. He didn't just lose some of his wealth. He didn't just lose his 401k or his IRA. No, listen to me. He didn't just lose that. He lost everything. Where he says, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I've got no source of income now all of a sudden. And what happened? What did he do? He fell on his face and he worshiped God. Why did Job do that? Because faith existed in his heart. So I want to talk a little bit about faith this morning. We're just going to go here and we're going to find a few things because we have a misconception about faith. We believe faith to be like the be-all, end-all of Christians, of Christianity. It's like if you just have enough faith, then nothing else matters. Right? That's what we think. We have that, like faith is a magic pill that we can swallow. We also think faith, I was going to get me a lamp and stick me a lamp up here, because we think faith is like a lamp. It's like, hey, everything's great. And then when something bad happens and the darkness falls, just like, click, turn on the faith, and everything's great. Faith is not something you just turn on. Job's faith existed before he lost everything. Job's faith existed before the tragedy befell him. Now his faith is simply being tested. You ever tested anything? Well, I want to see if this works. Men, have you ever built anything? You're screwing some boards together and you're putting in, maybe you're building a shelf and you're like, well, I need to see how tough it's going to be. So you sit on it or you stand on it, you kind of put your knee on it and you're like, all right, that looks like it's going to be tough enough. It's like you're just not 100% sure until you give it that little extra, right? Well, let me see if it's going to actually function. Let me see if it's going to hold. And so that's what you do. My dad loved to work with wood. He was always building things out of wood. And that's what he would do. He'd put a shelf together or something, and then he'd kind of push on it. Got to make sure it's going to hold. Can't have it, breaking on me. Can't have it doing that. Our faith is kind of the same thing. Sometimes it just needs to be tested. But let's talk about faith this morning, because there's certain things that faith is and there's certain things that faith is not, or it does not do, if you will. And so we're going to talk about these. First thing we're going to talk about is something that faith does not do. Number one, faith does not eliminate pain. Wait, what? Faith does not eliminate pain. No, you're supposed to just wake up, have faith in God, and all the bad stuff goes away. All the pain, all the hurt, all the heartache, it goes away. No, it does not. I want you to look at chapter 2, beginning in verse 7. Again, look at what it says here. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Do you realize that by the second chapter of Job, Satan had gone to God twice? The second time, God told Satan, okay, now you can touch his health. The first time God said, don't touch him. The second time, God says, now you can touch his health. And so this is where we're picking up at. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. That means head to toe, top of his head to the bottom of his feet. He was covered in boils. Covered in boils. Now, I want you to understand the monstrosity that Job had become. Look at what it says in verse 8. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Do you know what a potsherd is? It's a shard of a piece of a pot. So he took a pot and broke it so that he could scrape open his sores and allow the infection to drain out. Get that picture in your head. I'm serious, that's what he did. And so here's a man now that's lost his children, he's lost his wealth, his cattle, his camels, everything. His sheep, everything, oxen, everything's gone. He's lost his house. He's lost his wealth. He's lost everything. And now he's covered with these giant boils from head to toe. And the only relief he gets is when he takes a broken piece of pottery, punctures the boil to allow the pus to come out. And that's what he's spending his days doing. He's self-medicating, if you will. It's the only answer he has in his life. And so here he is. Probably, by the way, when his friends come to talk to him, it said that they didn't recognize him. Did you understand that? His face was so swollen. His body was so, just mutated, if you will. So swollen up, so puffy, so deformed from these boils that his friends came and they were like, who's that guy? Oh, that's our friend Job. That's who that is. And so that's the extent now of his trials, of his suffering. He's laying down in ashes and he is scraping the boils open so that they can drain and he can bleed a little bit to try to get some kind of relief from where he's at. That leads us to verse 9. Then his wife said unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. She's not saying that out of a heart of hatred. She's saying that because she's looking at her deformed husband, her suffering husband, and said, Job, I don't know what you did to God, but just finish it off, curse him, and let him take your life. Because you've done something to make God mad at you. You've done something. You see that? Job, this is your fault. And so just finish this path that you're on. Curse God out loud and let him kill you. Verse 10, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. That's a good way to talk to your wife. Not exactly something I would recommend, but it's something Job did. That's what he said. He goes, honey, you don't understand. You're speaking like a foolish woman. That's what he said. Look at what he says. He goes on. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this, did not Job sin with his lips? What did Job tell his wife? Laying here in these ashes, laying here covered in these boils, blood and pus running from his body, his children gone, his wealth gone, he had absolutely nothing. He had gone from the wealthiest man in his country to looking and being a pauper, covered in infection. And you know what he said? What did he tell his wife? Well, God gave me everything. God made good happen to me. Can't God make evil happen to me? What is Job saying? Doesn't matter how much faith I have in God, doesn't mean that bad things aren't going to happen to me. That's what Job is saying. He's like, there's nothing wrong with it, with what's going on. I mean, you want me to turn my back on God? I mean, just because this bad stuff is happening to me, that means that I got to turn my back on God? Christian, how many times do we want to turn our back on God when our faith is tested? No, God, this is not supposed to happen this way. You don't understand. This isn't fair. It's not right. I don't know how many times I would hear young people tell me, it's not fair. And I always tell them, life is not fair. Nothing that happens is fair. And sometimes you should be very grateful for that. Because if everything was, this is what I used to tell them, if everything was fair, we'd all be going straight to hell. And there would be no hope for us if everything was fair. So I'm glad God is not fair sometimes. And God said, you know what? Even though what is fair is eternity in hell for mankind, I'm still going to send my son. That's what God said, isn't it? And here Job is explaining to his wife, and he says, you don't understand. God gave me everything that I had. God blessed me. God can make evil come upon me. It doesn't change anything. What a statement to make. Despite his struggles, Job said, this doesn't change who God is. This doesn't change who he is at all. He goes, my faith isn't eliminating my pain. It doesn't change who I believe God is. Because God is allowed to do whatever he wants. That's literally what Job just said. God is allowed to do whatever he wants. We think, God is being petty. I mean, God throws Job under the bus in front of Satan. Hast thou considered my servant Job? Why would God do that? God is God. And he has a purpose for everything that he does. God had a purpose in this as well. Well, there's going to be something interesting we'll find out about that purpose here at the end. Second thing we see is faith does not provide a logical reason. Christian, stop trying to find the logical reason for your suffering. Stop trying to find the reason why. You may never understand the reason why. You may never find the logic behind what is going on. But you don't have to if there's faith in your life. Faith is something we just hold on to. Look all the way down to chapter 21 here in the book of Job. Chapter 21. Now, very famously, Job's friends arrive. And for 7 days they sit with him. By the way, if you're going to sit with somebody for 7 days, in Hebrew terms, it's called Shiva, or Shiva, however you pronounce that. And you would sit with the family for 7 days after the loss of a loved one. They came to mourn with Job for 7 days over the loss of his children. And when they got there, they didn't recognize who he was as they approached him. They were like, who's this guy? Oh, wow, that's Job. So they sat with him for 7 days and never said a word. They kept quiet. At the end of 7 days, the great discourse with Job's friends began. And you know what his friends told him? Job, we don't know what you did, but you need to confess your evil to God. This is your fault. This is why this is happening to you. And Job, I know that you're upset with me right now, but I'm speaking on behalf of God. That's what his friend said. And here's the thing. We can look at that and we can kind of chuckle and be like, his friends were so misguided. How many times have we said, I'm speaking on behalf of God? And we were misguided. Job's suffering the worst suffering he's ever experienced his entire life. And his friends are way off base. We talked about that last week, didn't we? How your friends can fail you. Job's friends failed him in this instance, right? And so there's this great discourse back and forth with his friends through many, many of these chapters. In chapter 21, Job responds to one of them. And this is what he says in verses 7 through 9. Wherefore do the wicked live, become old, yea, are mighty in power? Their seed is established in their sight with them, and their offspring before their eyes. Their houses are safe from fear, neither is the rod of God upon them. Job it sounds like he's complaining. It sounds like he's saying this, but he's making an argument, and he was saying, guys, you don't listen to me. You don't understand. And he's in between. He's like, he says, surely when you're gone, the world's going to lose a lot of wisdom. He told one of his friends that. Right? You're very, very wise. I get it. And he probably did respect his friends that much and knew that they were very, very wise. But in all of this, Job is saying, do you see wicked people prosper? That's what he's saying right here in these verses. I was righteous. I followed God. I believe God. I still believe God today. That's what Job's saying. I still believe God today. I trust him. I've put everything I have in him. My wife told me to just curse him and die. I ain't going to do it. God can bring whatever he wants into my life, and he's still going to be my God. But I look out, and you guys look out, and you see this, and evil people prosper. Do we not see that today? We see evil people prosper today. And you know what we say to ourselves? Why does God let them do that? Here's the answer. I don't know. I ain't God. That's the answer. Why does God let evil people prosper? Take it up with God when you get to heaven. The problem is, when you get to heaven, you ain't going to want to have that conversation. That's the honest truth. You know why? Because you're going to see God in a little bit different light. You're not going to see God as a mortal human being. God is beyond our understanding. What he thinks, we cannot. What he knows, we will not. What he does can never be figured out by us. That's why God told the prophet, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. God's like, you know what he's telling Jeremiah? Stop trying to figure it out. Stop trying to rationalize what's going on. Stop trying to figure everything out and just trust me. Just have faith in me. Just follow me. And this sounds like Job is complaining. It sounds like Job's just kind of laying, it's just not fair. He's not saying that. He's trying to tell his friends, do you guys understand there are evil people that have all these blessings? You guys are telling me that this is coming on me because I'm evil. But there's evil people right now that are getting all these blessings. What is Job telling his friends? Don't try to figure it out. God is God regardless. You'll tear yourself apart trying to find the rational reason why things happen in your life. Why did I lose my loved one? Why did this hurt come to me? Why did this family member turn their back on me? Why am I suffering here? And we're trying to figure out the reason why. And we're trying to understand the why. And God says, it's not for you to know the why. I just want you to have faith in me. See, faith, and when we do, we say, God, okay, but I trust you, God, I have faith in you. God's not going to say, and now I'm going to tell you why. You may find the why later on in life. You may never know why. You know, what's interesting is if you were to read the book of Job and you go through all this, not only did Job have a great discourse with his friends, but then Job began to have a discourse with God. And Job was very honest with God. Very honest with God. You know, to the point where he kind of got a little upset. And he was like, God, this is pretty rough. I've been faithful to you. I've been all this. And God looked at Job and said, Job, I know you don't understand the why. Job, let me ask you a question. Where were you at when I created everything? Where were you standing? I can't remember. That's what he said. Job, where were you at the foundation of the world? Where were you when I spoke the world into existence? Then he says, Job, can you stop the great behemoth? Can you go down into the deep and hook Leviathan by the mouth? Can you do the things that I can do? Right? Can you control nature the way I can control nature? Job, are you sovereign like I am sovereign? And Job kind of gets back in his place and he's like, you're right, God. Didn't mean Job didn't have faith, just meant that his faith was being tested, didn't it? Just meant that he was struggling with things in his life. And he's like, God, I'd really like to know the why. I'd really like to understand everything. And you go all the way through this in the book of Job. And you know the one thing that God never tells Job? Why he went through this. It says in the end, Job got his wealth back. God gave him, 10 times more than he had? It was a bunch. Gave him way more than he had. He was one of the wealthiest guys around to begin with. After that, it was way more. Gave him more kids. He had more children. 10 more kids. Right? I think it was double. God gave him double, twice as much as what he had before. And then God gave him the same amount of kids and everything else. God continued to bless him. But the one thing God never did was sit Job down and say, Job, let me explain to you what happened. You say, why did Job go through all of this? Why did he suffer the way he suffered? Why did he struggle the way he struggled? The answer is this. You can see it in this book of Job, for God's glory. There is no other reason. It is for God's glory. It wasn't for Job's glory. Do you realize when you read through the book of Job, it was never about, oh, look at how great Job is. It always went back to God is sovereign. God is mighty. God is great. And in the end, when God is having that discourse with Job and he tells Job this, and Job's like, you're right, God. You are God. I am not God. You are mighty and holy and you are righteous in everything that you do. God's like, all right, let's get this fixed. Let's get this changed. And then Job is instructed to pray for his friends, isn't he? God told Job, pray for your friends because they were off base too. Then God shows up to his friends. It kind of tells them what's going on. Hey, y'all, this is what you're going to do. You misrepresented me. You did not take the right steps. You're going to go to Job. And you're going to go ask Job to make sacrifices for you. You want to talk about coming back to your buddy with your hat in your hand? They just got done telling him that there was secret sin in his life or secret evil in his life or secret evil in his heart. And he's just not admitting it. Now they got to come back. Hey, we're really sorry. So God came to me. I know it's hard to believe. Job's probably like, no, not anymore. Not hard to believe at all. God came to me too. But they never understood the why. They never had that logical reason for what it is. The next thing we see about faith is something that it does do for us. In chapter 13, turn to chapter 13 of Job. Faith does provide an absolute position. An absolute position. You ever wanted to know, like, hey, I'm absolutely correct. Absolutely right. You know, you could sit there and you could argue your point and you could think you're 100% right. And guess what? You can be 100% wrong. But when we trust in God, it gives us an absolute position to stand upon. In chapter 13, verses 13 through 16, look at what it says. Again, Job is talking to his friends here. This is that discourse. And he says in verse 13, hold your peace. Let me alone that I may speak, and let come on me what will. I love that. Job's like, guys, quiet. Stop sitting here trying to figure all this out. Stop trying to do this and just let whatever's going to happen, happen. Verse 14, wherefore do I take my flesh in my teeth and put my life in mine hand? Though he slay me, remember this is that famous verse that everyone quotes about Job. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. You get that? What did Job say he was going to do? Even if God killed him, took his life, what did he say he was going to do? He was going to trust in God. He's like, it doesn't matter what's going to happen. I'm going to trust in God. It doesn't matter if I have pain. That Job's probably saying that right after he got done cutting himself. Right after he got done trying to relieve a little bit of that nasty pressure and infection. He's got some pus running off his bodies. He's filthy. He's dirty. He's laying in ashes, remember? Sitting down in ashes. He's a sight to be seen. And here is this disgusting, if you will, human being sitting on the ground in ash and filth with blood and pus pouring out of his body. And he looks up and he says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. I don't know about you, but I've never been to that point. Never been to that point. Christian, when the tough time comes, you know what you need to say? God, I don't understand why. I'm not trying to figure out why. I know it would be nice to know. And I know I've got pain, and my pain's not going to go away. I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and everything's going to be fine. But God, I can tell you this. To my dying breath, I'm going to trust your ways. I'm going to trust who you are. Because God, I am not God. You are God. And I trust you. That's what Job said. Look at what he says in verse 16. He also shall be my salvation. For an hypocrite shall not come before him. You know, Job said, I'm not going to turn my back on God now. You expect me to stand before him, before my God, as a hypocrite that turned his back on him because things didn't go the way I wanted them to go, because the way I expected them to go? Let God kill me. Let God decide when my life ends. Let God decide how much suffering I'm going to go through. But when I stand before him, I'm going to be real. And I'm going to tell him, God, I trusted you through it all. Amen. I trusted you through the pain, through the suffering, through everything. Faith gives us that foundation, an absolute position for us to place our lives upon. There's one more thing we see about faith. Faith does provide an irreplaceable hope. An irreplaceable hope. Turn to chapter 19. Chapter 19 of Job. We're going to start in verse 23. Read just a couple verses here. Look at what he says. I love what Job says here. Job sitting here, suffering, sitting here, have lost everything. He's a shell of the man that he was before. And look what he says in verse 23. Oh, that my words were now written. Oh, that they were printed in a book. Huh. I find that funny. They are. But that's what Job cried out. Verse 24, that they were graven with an iron pen and lead in the rock forever. He goes, get some lead, get some iron, and let's carve them into a rock because I want my words to last. Look at what he says. These are the words. For I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand in the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, he was a very graphic man, wasn't he? He was in a very graphic position in life. Yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not another, though my reins be consumed within me. This is literally what Job is saying. He goes, write this down. Remember this. I'm telling you right now. I know that my Redeemer liveth. I know my God is alive. And when I die, when I'm buried in the ground, and this body of mine rots away, there will be a day that I will rise again and stand before my God. That's what he said. Job believed in the resurrection of the dead. Didn't he? You know why he believed in the resurrection of the dead? Well, because God promised it. And Job said, and I love this. He goes after the worm, right? After the skin worms destroy my body. Look what he says there in verse 26. Yet in my flesh shall I see God. Job didn't say in my spirit. Job didn't say in a spiritual form. He said in my flesh, I will rise again and stand before God. Job did not live for the things of this earth. Job did not exist for what he could get and the blessings, the physical blessings, if you will, that he believed he could receive from God. Job lived for that day he would stand before God and look upon him with his new eyes, his new body, and his new flesh. Job's like, that's the day I'm living for. That's the day I look forward to. And despite all these things that's happened, I know for a fact I'm going to see God once again, and I'm going to get to bow to my Savior. And I'm going to get to bow before my God and say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. Did you guys blessed today by the singing? The choir sang one of my favorite songs. They've got a lot of songs that are my favorite songs, but this is one of them. The one they sang this morning. I love that song. That's why I cry holy. God is holy, isn't he? Christian, despite what happens on this earth, have faith. Hold on to what little bit of faith you have. The Bible says that faith the size of a grain of mustard seed can move a mountain. Hold on to what little bit of faith you have and know that one day you'll be standing before God Almighty. And everything that happened on this earth will fade away. You say, I don't see how it will. I promise you it will. You say, how do you know? You don't know, Jerry. You've never been to heaven. Well, the Bible says that Jesus Christ is going to wipe away every tear out of our eyes. Every tear. You know what that means? That every travesty that happened to you upon this earth, every heartache, every pain, every hurt, every bit of suffering, Jesus Christ will wipe away. Amen. The emptiness that you felt from broken relationships, the hurt that you felt from someone wronging you, the heartache that you've experienced for all these years of your life, whether it's something that happened in your childhood, something that happened in your adult life, whatever it is, the baggage that we have here will be gone. The loved ones that we have lost, that were saved, that we know went to heaven, guess what? You're going to get to embrace them. You're going to get to hug on them and love on them. And not just for one day, not just for a weekend. You know, Carrie lost her aunt the other day, and this week, I say the other day is last week. This week, we had a funeral. We went up to Nebraska on Tuesday and Wednesday. Wednesday, we had a funeral for her aunt. And we're standing there with all the family members. And we're sitting there, we're like, man, it's really nice to get everybody together. She's got a big family, a bunch of people there. And we're like, it's really nice to have everybody together, but we just wish it wasn't a funeral that brings us together. It seems like the last few times it's always been a funeral that brought the family together. You know, she was talking to one of our nephews, or it was a cousin, one of her cousin's kids or whatever. He's in college, you know, young guy. And she goes, it could be a wedding. And she's looking at him, and he's sitting next to his dad. He looks over his dad. His dad goes, doesn't have to be yours. He goes, okay, I'm good then. Right? It's like, don't throw me under the bus. I ain't ready to get married yet. It was just kind of funny. All right? But it's like we're sitting there talking. We're like, man, it'd be great to be able to get together and not because we lost somebody. But as wonderful as it was to be able to spend that time with all those family members, you know, one by one, what happened that day? People said, goodbye. Hopefully we'll get to see you again. Goodbye for now. And we watched the family members exit out. And then it came to the point, Carrie and I had to say, goodbye. Hopefully we'll see you guys again. And we made our exit. You know what? In heaven, we won't have to do that. You'll get together with your family in Christ. You'll get to embrace those loved ones. You'll get to hold on to them. And there is no goodbye. That's what Job was living for. You know, I bet Job was pretty excited when he got to heaven, seeing his kids there. He probably embraced them and he said, let's go for a walk. I've been waiting for this day for a while. Because he did. All because Job had faith in God. And as hard as that was, as hard as his life was, in that instance that we have in this entire book, Job said, my faith is the only thing that got me through it. My faith is the only thing that held me together. Because my friends and my wife all told me to quit. My flesh gave out on me. But I knew God was in control. And so I trusted him. I trusted him through it all. Stand with me this morning.